Hi everyone, and welcome to flm204 here at FX PhD. And today we're going to be taking a look at things regarding file transfers and assembly from files and relinking media, EDLs, things like that. I want to point out that we're using 2009 Extension 1 Service Pack 3. A thing about a lot of this stuff dealing with assembly and so forth is it really does vary based upon the version. Service Pack 3 fixed some stuff. I've been running some tests and it seems to be working better in a lot of ways, but just be aware that, I don't know, it's frustrating at times, but simple things become difficult because of changes that are introduced and they might just not catch it in the beta process. No fault the beta testers, as I know, just doing it myself, you just might not have a file assembly within the 3-week period. So anyway, 2009 Service Pack 3. What we're going to take a look at is just an assembly actually from Red, and this was actually from a PTA job that was done here at Hootenanny. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do this in Avid. Now, I have this philosophy that knowledge is power, so to speak. And if you know how to do things in other applications or know how to advise them, it really helps when you're doing your work. On top of that, it really helps make sure that things don't get messed up when they come to you in online. I mean, I've had some situations where, if you don't follow the conventions that we're going to show you here, for instance, maintaining time code, you could get bagged and have to iMatch a whole spot. So anyway, just be aware of that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and switch over to Avid. I'm going to have Jerem Sloan, who's one of the editors here at Hootenanny, just go over some procedures for getting our 3D footage into Avid at this point in time, with the idea that we're eventually going to pull DPX files for grading. The idea being we want to pull neutral, full-range DPX files that contain the full information that's in the R3D file, because we're going to take it over, say, to a grading place and deal with it there. So let's go ahead and head on over to Avid, where I had a chance to chat with Jerem. Thanks, Jerem, for taking the time to chat with us about this. We're going to, again, approach this from the standpoint of we don't need to know everything about Avid, but to kind of have the philosophy. If you're doing finishing, it's really good to have some knowledge about the workflow. So why don't you tell us about kind of the pitfalls? I mean, in theory, couldn't you just import the QuickTime proxies that come along with the R3D files?
Technically you can, and you can edit with them, but if you're going to do any onlining later on, wanting to go back to the original raw files, it's not really a good idea because the Avid loses the time code in between. As you can see here, if we open up one of these proxy QuickTimes, there is actually time code embedded into our QuickTime. But for some reason, if you just drag it into the Avid, it doesn't show up. So what we're going to want to do is we use this program here called MetaCheater. And we open up our QuickTime file here. We open it up, and it's going to give us our QuickTime and put it into an ALE, which is an Avid log exchange file, which is basically just the metadata of our clip. It's not going to actually have the media going along with it, but it's going to give us all the metadata that we're going to need when we import it and when we need, to get all of the time codes when we pull our EDL for finishing.
Okay, so basically you're going to save this Avid, and obviously when you're doing this, you'd throw all your movies that you're going to import into this. And so this is also available using Red Rushes as well, effectively the ability to generate an ALE from that time code. But again, this is just the way we're doing things here. It works, so we haven't changed it because it's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we'll go ahead and save that ALE file.
One thing we want to make sure that we do is we come over here and make sure that we're working in NTSC if we're in the States, or PAL otherwise. Make sure that we're working. This stuff was shot at 2398, so we want to make sure that our list is at 2398. So then we will save a list here.
And the other thing we'll show in a little bit, this idea too of pulling in this 24 frame per second footage into a 30 frame per second project, and how you go about converting that and tracking back, because you can actually do that. Suppose they've got an Avid project set up they've been working with for a while. It's an NTSC 30 frame per second project, but you want to bring in 24 stuff, so we'll show some workarounds for doing that.
Yeah, so it makes this Avid log exchange file here. And we're just going to bring that up here, and you'll see now that my clip is here. And if I do this, you can see that our time code comes along with our clip, which is awesome, exactly what we want. But you'll also notice if you bring it over, the media is not attached to it yet. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to take this clip, we're going to highlight it, we're going to batch import. It's an offline clip, so we're going to go ahead and grab it. We're going to come in here, make sure that we're loading whatever resolution that we want, make sure that it's going to whatever drive that we'd like it to go to. One thing you want to make sure that you do is make sure that you resize the image to fit the format raster. These, as you noticed, were letterboxed, and we're working in NTSC, which is 4:3. So if you use the other ones, it's going to stretch or crop your image, which you don't want. If you use the resize, it's going to give you a letterbox. So make sure you're doing that.
And once that's done, they load in the clips, and again, that takes a little bit of time because you're processing non-native Avid files. Again, you could do, if you wanted on another workstation, that's one benefit of Red Rushes maybe, is you could actually convert them ahead of time if you wanted. But again, we did some tests, and the processing speed wasn't all that bad or different or whatever than before.
You just hit that and import it on in.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stop taking a look at the import part of it and take a look at what we need to do to export things once the edit is locked, so to speak.
All right, so we've imported all of our footage and we've done some cuts. And we've actually done a cut for our director here. And what we're going to do is we're going to output an EDL of those edit decisions. And we'll open up our EDL manager here. And we've got a preset here for creating a red list. And, as I was discussing it at some point, when you're using, when you go to download MetaCheater, they actually have a Red 16 little plugin that you can download as well for EDL Manager that will allow you to use full names of the clips, which is pretty awesome. You save settings, and we're going to pull that over from our editor. So it's taking that edit decision list and it's pulling over all of our clips in the order that they are ascending from beginning of spot to the end. And as you'll notice, like many of you are probably familiar with a CMX 3600 list. And I'll go ahead and save this and show you what happens when you do that. You'll notice that it truncates the names, and that can make it pretty difficult later on if something's not, matching up the way it's supposed to, and you need to go and you want to find out which clip you're, supposed to be using. If you're missing some of the clip name, it's going to be tough. All right. So a moment ago, John was talking about the fact that you might be interested in editing 2997, even though your footage was shot at 2398. A lot of times you'll be working on jobs where they shot on film, and you've got daily tapes on D-Beta or whatever, and you're dealing with footage at 2997, and you need to mix it with this footage at 2398. And the Avid doesn't let you mix frame rates, so you're probably going to want to transfer the time code to 2997, which MetaCheater conveniently does for you. Very, very simple thing you need to do is hit 24 to 30 down here, NTSC Film Project. We'll change your time codes here, but then you're also going to want to make sure that you come over here, make sure that this is 2997.
And again, we'll show you after saving the CDL in the project, what you do to that to run the script. We actually have an automator droplet for that, or it's also available on the Smoke and Flame systems as shell script as well. Okay, so we've got the 24 frames per second EDL exported from Avid, and what we're doing is we're using that as a pull list, and that's because what we're doing is sending DPX sequences or exporting DPX sequences of the imagery so it can be graded. So we're exporting 10-bit log DPX images, getting those on a hard drive, taking them over to another place that has a grading system like Nolo or Optimus, and they're grading from the 10-bit log files. So again, we're going to use Monkey Extract to do this, a program you can buy on the net, and it's kind of become our quick favorite.
Yeah, actually, I like it a lot, and I think the biggest reason I do is because you can pretty much use any sort of XML or EDL out there for either Final Cut Pro or the Avid. Film Scribe, regular CMX 3600, which I think most of us are pretty familiar with. So the first thing you want to do when you come in here is you point it to your EDL, which, you know, I got here on my desktop. I got a 24 here. And I'm going to want to point it to where my files are, obviously, which they are not there. They are here. So this is where our red files are.
And it searches actually within the hierarchy, so it'll search within nested folders and so forth.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and click that, pointing to the right place. Got our right EDL. Make sure this is on the time of day time code. And then we're going to go ahead and check our render settings. Here in Chicago, you know, when we're sending things out to people that are working on a base light, they work in DPX format. You can, of course, pull TIFFs, QuickTimes, or QuickTime wrappers if you'd like, but we stick to the DPX. Let's see.
The other thing is you want to, you know, make sure like the frame rate on the header matches the R3D frame rate, which is good. Also, if you wanted to move the DPX black point, you could, but again, we're not going to do that. And the XML options, we're going to do render only the frames used, and then you can also enter the number of handles that you want. Generally, we're going to do between 12 and 24. And then in the new EDL for grading, we're going to change the real names to just get rid of that underscore because that can cause some issues with certain applications. So anyway, and then you've just got other various options over on the right for how you want your folders organized and so forth. So again, and then the number of processors. You can use all 8 cores if you have it. Sometimes you want to use 6 just and leave a little bit of processing available to other ones. But it's really cool, and if you look at Activity Manager while this is running, you can see it's actually using the full horsepower, and that's really critical on an Octo Mac. I mean, it's really useful to use all 8 processors because it speeds it up a lot.
Yeah, it's super cool. So then we move along and we change to 2K, which is, you know, for most commercial work. We work in 2K for grading. And then you know a little bit more.
Yeah, the scaling algorithms, basically, if you want a little bit of a sharper image when you're scaling, we're going to go ahead and use CatMilROM or Langkos. That's the other one that is good to use, but generally CatMilROM is good. The fit method doesn't matter in this case because we're not actually changing the aspect ratio of the footage. We're doing 24:8 by 1024. And then the key here on the right is color and gamma, and this is actually really critical. Theoretically here, what we're trying to do is treat it like a film negative, right? We want to get as much data as possible out of that. So what we're going to do, if you take a look here at Red Alert, the key is just to scan several of the files. This is the first file, but we've actually gone through and checked several of the files to kind of see how similar they are. In the new versions of Red Alert, you're actually not going to clip a lot of your highlights like you used to in the previous versions. But in this case, you can see that we actually are. So you can see that by the red and blue indicators, that's indicating that we're getting clipped pixel values on the red and blue. Okay, so but the first thing we're going to do is go up here to the top, and we like working in camera RGB space. That's the native space of the camera. Now, it looks washed out, but you shouldn't worry. I mean, there's just a little bit less matrixing going on in this case. Now, for our output space, what we're going to do is we're going to do red log. And what that will do is that will apply, that'll take the 12-bit linear data and convert it into 10-bit log file, but using the full range from 0 to 1024. That's unlike the other options here. If you take a look at the PD log files under output LUT gamma space, you can see that you have 685 and 985. Those would leave headroom between those values in the top of the file to account for, say, if you had a film scan, because you really don't know how much headroom you need. But in this case, since we're working with red files, we know there's nothing whiter than white. So we can take white and pin it up to 1023. So we're using the full range of the DPX file when we're doing that. Okay, so now let's talk about the clipping. You want to do this first before you try and adjust your clipping and other things. What we'll generally do is just drop the ISO down. Again, this is just metadata, so we'll drop it down to 250. And you can see now that we've got our image there preserved a bit. We've got some headroom there on the scenes so that we know that, on other scenes that may be brighter, we're going to be okay. The other thing we like doing is also taking the DRX and switching it up to 1. which actually takes the highlights so that the red, green, and blue values are closer at their highest level, as opposed to being kind of a bit tinted in color. As far as the color temperature, that's again metadata. Sometimes I'll just change that to the native daylight of the camera. In this case, we'll just go ahead and leave this at 5200. Now, while you're doing this, what's happening in the background with the red alert is in the folder that houses the R3D file. If you go and we'll navigate down into there, you can actually see that in addition to the QuickTime proxies now, you've actually got what's called an RSX file, which is kind of a settings file. Now, this may change in the future, but this is the way that it's happening right now. This is actually how the software knows when you open up Red Alert again what the last color settings you used were. And we can take those color settings and actually use those to do the conversion in Monkey Extract. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say apply only RSX color settings and then use this RSX for everything. So what we're going to do is we browse to that single RSX file that we just used and enter it there in that file path. And then what we want to do is also then down here below, if you look at the footage color space selections, what you can do is you have various options there. You can actually use red space, camera RGB, or Rec 709. What we're saying is use those settings that we set in the RSX. If you look at the output color space, same deal there. We're going to say, okay, use those settings for the RSX. And this way you know you've got it set up correctly. And again, we've got that DRX setting in there that we did, so we want to make sure that that's intact as well. So again, this is really, really critical. What the concept is that we want to get the equivalent of a digital negative, so we can maintain all the color information that we can in these DPX files that we create, because then you can actually use those and grade them. Even if you don't go to a different place to grade them, you can actually do that grading in Smoke or Flame. And then we just go ahead and hit proceed, and it starts going in the background and extracting the frames and pulling the DPX files. So that's done processing, and one thing we kind of glossed over is actually this EDL that you get that's output from Monkey Extract. And so here we have our EDL, and what you can see is it renamed it with all the files. You can see there's our kind of shortened clip names and so forth that correspond to those names as well. And you can see actually that the time code matches because we selected the right time of day time code in the file. But Monkey Extract will actually create this file for you automatically. Again, if you go back to those settings, when we looked at it, basically what you want to do is create a new EDL for grading with real names changed to, okay, so that will create actually the new EDL for you. So again, that's really critical, and that's the EDL that we'll actually use for grading when you want to give it to grading. And this is the EDL that will actually load up in Smoke to take a look at this footage now that it's all rendered and so forth. So earlier we showed MetaCheater if you wanted to bring in your 24 frame per second footage into a 30 frame per second project, and that's actually what we did here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this text file. You can actually see, if we open that up, you can actually say there's our EDL, and if you look at the timecode values, you can actually see that you have 25 there and 27 in the seconds frames. So we've got a 30 frame per second EDL, but remember all our footage in our files is all 2398, so we need to convert that. Well, there's a script on Flame that's in user discrete, whatever your product name is, /scripts. And what I did is actually did a automator droplet that actually allows you to run that on Mac. So we'll drag this on to convert EDL to 24 frame per second. And basically it's an automator workflow that will actually start up automator and actually create a 24 frame per second file from that 30 frame per second EDL that we just gave it. And once that's done, you get this converted EDL, and you can see now that the time codes here in our 24 frame per second converted EDL actually match what's happening in our original 24 frames per second EDL. So that's a really useful utility if you've got Avid editors who are working in a 30 or standard NTSC project, but all your source material is at 24 frames per second. So anyway, well, Jerem, thanks so much for taking the time to show us this. Again, as I mentioned, it's really helpful to have an insight into how this works on the Avid. So invariably, if there are problems, as an online, the person who's finishing can help you out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you.
One thing we kind of glossed over in that discussion is the idea of converting the EDL. So let's go ahead and take a look at that here. Another thing is, if you look in your release, you have a directory, and here I've got 2009 Service Pack 3 scripts. These are actually the EDL scripts that will convert an EDL from, say, 30 to 24. What I did is actually created and took this script and copied it into that Automator workflow, so that happens on the fly. You run it through Automator, and it puts an EDL on your desktop that's already been converted from 30 to 24. But let's just go ahead here really quick and just confirm that for you. If we take a look at this EDL, the director's cut, you can see that it's actually a 30 frame per second EDL. Again, you can tell that because you've got 27 here. Okay, so what we'd ordinarily do is run one of these scripts, and to run the script in the shell, it's really easy. It's a Perl script. You just want to type the full path, so user discrete Flint 2009.1 SP3 scripts, and we'll do 30 to 24 underscore v dot point vo dot point 5. Okay, and then you give it the name of the file, which is this, and then you pipe it into, we'll call it effectively the same thing with the 24 at the end. Okay, and then if we look at this, you can see now that all our time codes have been converted into 24 frames per second. Okay, so that's what that script does. That's that script I showed you. The other thing you can do is obviously just rename your script. You can move the script to a different folder, name it something simple so you don't have to type this whole path like I did. But anyway, that's effectively what that compressor droplet does that we showed you. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead, Jerem's output all those files, and we want to import them. So what we're going to do is we're going to load these in directly from load them directly into the frame store. So go ahead here, and if we come up here, here's all our footage. If we scan the subdirectories, we'll see all the DPX sequences, okay? So a couple things that we want to do. If you take a look at this, critical things that you might want to do. You can get a tape name from the file header. That can be useful because you can actually see, if you notice that, it's got some more information for you. I'm just going to go ahead and enter the tape. But what's really critical on these files is you want to, instead of entering timecode, very, very critical to go ahead and say what we want to do is we want to do file header timecode. And now you can see that's got the timecode that was included in the DPX files. Very, very critical because, of course, you're going to use this timecode to match back using the EDL. The other thing that we want to do, remember we had that lookup table. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a 1D LUT for this, turn that on, and we're going to go ahead and create a LUT. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to select all these and create a LUT. Once you create it, you don't need to do this again. But remember what we talked about. The idea being is we wanted this log file that we created to actually represent the full range. And you can see that no highlights were clipped. So what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and we want to do a log to linear conversion. Okay, so we're going to convert the logarithmic file to linear use within Flame or Smoke. You can see right here that what I was talking about, you have PD log 685. Normally your Cineon files, blacks are at 95, whites are at 685, which means you have that headroom for film that we talked about. But what we're going to do is we're going to set the reference black down to 0 and the reference white all the way up to 1023 because that's the data that's in the file. Now it looks dark and everything, but that's actually a linear light viewing. If we go ahead and take here and look at linear, you can see that it actually, especially if we switch this to 1, the film gamma, I think, to 1. There we go, it brightens up. Now our blacks are really washed out, but it looks more normal, I guess you would say, if we set this up in viewing things in linear light here, and you just tap to swap between video, log, and linear light. Because what this is, this log back to linear, is actually recreating the linear light output if you were to output it in red alert. So let's go ahead now, and let's just go ahead and we'll switch this back to video, and you can see it looks a little dark. Well, that's okay. You just want to make sure you can adjust your video gamma if you want to bring that up. So it looks a little nicer. But again, we're not going to clip anything based upon this graph that we've got here. And so generally what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave that in video display, so 0.45. So I know I'm getting it. I'm going to come into 12-bit packed. So go ahead and exit out and save this as red import that I already have. Now you can see I've got that loaded in here. And so if we scan subdirectories, basically go ahead, I've got the file header timecode set, I've got the tape set, I've got resize to custom resolution. It actually picks that up when I did the 1D LUT because it's effectively doing a resize on us, right? Because we're doing a 1 LUT. But it's going to keep the sizes, and go ahead and import all those files. And then when we come back out, if you look at the import, we've got all the files, and you can see that's got the time code set up. We've got 2048 by 1024 12-bit files. Okay, so now we've got those all loaded up. This is if you want to bring them into the system. Now, these are 2048. We're probably not going to work at 2048, but let's talk about that in a second. We'll go ahead and import an EDL. We'll go ahead and load. And what we're going to do is, it's actually the 24 frames per second for grading. We don't need to worry about any of this at all. So we'll go ahead and load EDL. And now we need to tell it where to find the files, okay? Because in theory, we've got these files loaded in. So we're going to select the import reel. And if you select update capture marks to see, it's not finding anything. Why is it not finding anything? Well, this is a common thing that you would want to do, is go into preferences, and we're going to say compare tape name search. Because if you look at our tape name here, we've got this name that, remember, Jerem said go ahead and make the tape names that name. If we go to export, exit the import, and switch over here to list view, if we look at these files here, you can see that the clip name is that, but the tape name is import because that's what we had assigned, all right? So what we want to do is we want to have it ignore those clip names while it's doing the search for those files. Okay, so if we go ahead and compare tape name search, let's go ahead and update capture marks, and still nothing. What is going on here? Well, what's going on here is we're actually in a 1280 by 720 project. And so what it's looking for is it's looking for 1280 by 720 frames. But it's not going to find this because these are 2048 by 1024. So there are a couple things that you can do when you do this. Let's say you wanted to go ahead and work on this at 2048 by 1024. What you do is say override project resolution, and then go ahead and enter in manual values that match the resolution of what you've loaded in. 16 by 9 with the height is what we want because that's an aspect ratio of 2. 10-bit, we'll set that to 12-bit, and now update capture marks. Lo and behold, it finds everything. So when I hit assemble, what will happen is it will actually take those clips and assemble them, creating a 1024 clip in that reel. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So assemble compete, that was really fast. If we look here, here's our edited clip. And again, you can see down in the status menu down here, it's got the resolution, everything that we'd expect. But that's not really what I want to do. What I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and just work at 1024 by 720. Okay, so if we update the capture marks, it's not finding any of those things. Well, what we can do is we can do an auto soft resize when these get loaded in. So it's going to soft resize these clips to 1280 by 720. So if I hit auto soft resize here, we're going to say crop edges. Let's go ahead and let's just do that. We'll crop edges. We'll use Lankos for the resize, and then update capture marks. Lo and behold, it finds those. So let's go ahead now, and we'll just go ahead and assemble. And it's actually going ahead and processing. Now, why is it doing this resize? We said, hey, auto soft resize. It shouldn't be resizing them. Well, that's because we have this auto render assembly button set here, so that when you start assembling this, when you do the assemble, it's going to go ahead and render that resize for you. Okay, so instead of having to wait for that, you can do that now. Generally, probably when you're working and starting out, you might want to just go ahead and have auto render assembly off. But again, it's not changing the size of anything. You know, in the library, we didn't resize the files on import. It's actually rendering it now at the assembly time. So again, make sure you have these options set correctly. In some of the older versions of software, this was actually not following the correct resize that you wanted to do. But again, it seems to be working fine now at this point in time. So that's just about done. And it's just to show you, if you turn off auto render assembly, and we'll go ahead and hit assemble again, look how quick that was. We exit out of there, and here's the unrendered assemble, and here's the rendered assemble. So we'll go ahead and take these both, load them to desktop. And again, if we play this, go ahead and zoom in, you can see actually that you have resize on each of these clips, and you can tell that by the resize button. So this is with it off, and this is with it auto assembly on. All right, so what's interesting about doing this? Well, this is a really interesting way of working, and especially with these files, you could actually begin working and begin doing fixes with this. And then actually we'll talk about unlinking the media and relinking it so that when you get your final grade from Telecine, or Baselite, I guess it wouldn't be Telecine in this case, you can actually go ahead and apply that to that. So let's go ahead and play with this in batch. We're going to take let's go ahead and take the rendered version, I guess. Go into batch. Here's our clip, T-click, as we learned. And so what we can do, let's go ahead first. Let's say we wanted to go ahead and just, they're going to want to do some kind of vignette on the side of this. And just to get a head start, you're going to want to go ahead and do this. So say you want to add a spark here. And, you want to go ahead and load up. Do I have this fixation with Sapphire vignettes? This is like the third time I've done this in this class. So we've got a vignette here, so you can see that we've got that set up and ready to go. Again, we can mute it, or actually I just mute it. And then let's go in and turn that on. Look at the result here. And let's just say, you just want to make the opacity down to 1, let's say, make it even darker. All right, so we've got that. And so then what you could do is you could just then go ahead and copy this to all these various clips. And we'll just do that for a couple because you guys get the idea of that, all right? And then, let's say you want to do, let's go in and think of a fix that we can do here on the scene. And this is where it really gets kind of interesting because you don't need, you'll see in a second why this is kind of cool. And again, it would be a temp fix because you don't have the final. That's kind of a goofy looking spot. Okay, let's just say here we want to go ahead and brighten up this lamp or something like that. So we'll go ahead here and do a batch effects that we've got set up. We'll go ahead and add an action node in and just take this in. Go ahead and in the keyer. Let's look at this. There we go. We'll go ahead and add a G mask. We'll just do a mask on this. And just do a really quick mask. Okay, so again, not everything. Like you're using paint, that could be problematic. Batch paint, maybe not, but again, we're trying to do stuff that, like, the idea is we're going to eventually replace this footage. So if you're aware of that moving forward, you can actually, start your fixes and so forth like this. And actually, what we're going to do is we want to do this. Let's move it here. Delete this keyframe. And then track our axis. Okay, so then we've got that. And then, we've got it tracked like that. Again, really rough. But let's go ahead and go in color corrector now. And again, this will change, but again, you can get it kind of roughed in. And we'll do that. And there we go. So we've got that set up like that. Let's go ahead and just blur this a little bit. Okay, so we brightened up the lamp, say, all right? So we've done this, maybe gone in, done some other fixes, maybe they don't want the type on there or something like that. Again, as long as you don't paint and it's non-destructive, you're gonna be okay. So if we go out, I want to do a couple things on the desktop as well in this workflow. And again, just to kind of show you the kind of things that you can do and use this workflow to your advantage. Notice I have clip history on. I'm keeping sources. I'm not keeping intermediates in this case. And so let's go ahead and think of something to do here. I was looking earlier and thought a good one would be, I don't like the color of this backpack. So we'll just go ahead and kind of tweak the color of that. Go back here to the first frame, and we'll just go ahead and select this as a starting point there. Let's go ahead and invert the matte, and color correct foreground, and we'll just swing the hue here really obviously. Let's go ahead and just go in and add G-mask. And we want it outside. Track that. So anyway, just basically I'm doing this to kind of show you really quickly what we're doing. Turn. Looks like that's big enough. And now let's just go ahead and go back into the keyer, and I'll get some more of this and shrink it. Okay, now again, not the best fix in the world, but again, you get the idea here that I've fixed this. So we'd go ahead and process this, and I'd swap that back into my effect here. And then what we're going to do is then just do the idea of, this is something obviously that if I reload the footage and the footage is in the same position the next time, I can easily recreate this, right? I haven't done anything really destructive or manual to it at this point. Of course, there'd be some adjustments in the keyer, but you know, suppose you're doing a roto or something like that and I had to roto this shape, as you can see it's not, you know, getting a little bit of bleed, then that's something you might not have to recreate when I reload in the telecine footage. Again, the idea of this is just getting things started so that, you know, you can get a jump on a job and get things going or whatever. So just about done with that. Notice I had to pick a very long frame. Exit out. And that was 25. And I'm going to go ahead and swap this shot back in there. And of course it says source and destination not of the same type. So what we need to do is go ahead and do a resize on this. So go ahead and take this clip in. Check out our settings here. What we want to do is go ahead and switch down here to 10-bit. So we've got 1280, 720, taking this down to 10-bit. And we'll go ahead and hit, delete that because we want to do the whole clip. And process this baby down. And have to watch these guys do this goofy dancing some more. Of course, it's supposed to be humorous dancing. So go ahead and get this done. Again, done nothing really destructive. Created a clip that kind of stands out on its own. I've got this, which is the output of a keyer setup. This, which is an output of a resize. Swap this shot in here. And that works there. And then just for the last thing, what I'm going to do is just really quickly, because don't want to kind of blow the time on this, is go ahead and match this source out. It's a long clip. That's a very long clip. Actually, all these are long clips. There's one. And what I'm going to do is just show you this and go in to show you a destructive one. So we'll just take this and go to our first frame here. And I'm just going to do that. And we'll have to do a resize on that, of course, because that's not going to be the right resolution. We'll pick up what we had last. This idea of kind of creating a clip that you can't track history, because of course the paint module, that manual stroke, there's no way that it's going to track my history. Go ahead and go out. What was this frame? Okay, so there's my clip. I got this set up, got everything done. Let's go ahead and save this to library. Go ahead and go here in the library. And what we're going to do now is we've got this import here. That's our graded footage. So this is the footage, come back. And what we want to do is I don't want to lose all this work that I've done on this clip right here. So what we'll do is we'll use one of the tools, and it's the unlink tool. And basically it will get rid of the footage here. And what's going to say is we're going to say unlink. Oh, actually we don't want to do that right now. We're going to say video only, unlink the video. We're going to unlink reloadable footage. Now you can unlink all, which is get rid of all the media, that's including that stuff that we painted. But I can't reload that from tape because that's of course a paint stroke that's been painted on there. So what I'm going to do is unlink reloadable and then unlink just all resolutions. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and say unlink now, confirm, and now this has got unlinked media. Okay, now you're seeing some media here, right? This is our processed clip, if you would, in this point. So if we open this clip up, let's go ahead and show the history here. You can actually see that I do have some stuff that's unrendered here on this resize. So what we'll do then is go ahead and I'm going to close this back up. And I'm going to move this work in progress into our import graded here. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and say relink, and relink from reel. What that will do is I'll take a look at all the clips in the same reel and relink that, taking a look at the metadata. So we'll go ahead and say relink from reel, relinked 15 video sources and 0 audio sources, no missing media. Okay, so basically it says unrendered, but if we open this up and say show all, you can see now, look at these proxies. They're actually in full color proxies and not the original ones. So we'll go ahead and hide all, load this out on the desktop. And if we take this and take a look at it, basically, let's take a look at this scene. We'll go ahead and select these first couple scenes here in timeline process. It's going to basically go in and use those new clips, and it's going to, of course, render the spark and the resize on top of this of what we had done. So really nice way of working. It's going to apply all that stuff. We've done all this work. We've added the, Sapphire vignette on everything. And of course you had the resize as well that we did. If you take a look at it now, we've got that new footage with the vignette on it. Now here's a scene. This is our scene that was actually a batch effects. Okay, remember we did something to this. So let's go ahead and process this. And it's going to go ahead and redo the fix for us that we ended up doing on this scene. So again, you can see how useful this is to have this stuff actually, be working on stuff, get some prepped, and there you can see there's our light that we did that's now much brighter than the original was. Let's go ahead and come down here. And again, these are clips that we hadn't done anything to yet. Let's go ahead and find this history. If you take a look at this, you can see that this is actually our old footage, remember, with the blue backpack. And since this is actually rendered, it's not going to replace everything because, again, we said we only wanted to unlink the reloadable media in this case. And then same thing down here. We've got this with our painted frame on top of it, which is going to be pretty tough to recover. But let's go ahead and go into batch and take this relink clip in with us. That's our old one, and here's our relinked one, and there's our scene there. Let's go ahead and go here. And, I didn't want to do that. I want to just do this. If we take this, what I can do is I can go ahead and just say do a pre-batch effects on this. Now we've got this, and what I want to do is go ahead here and basic expand history. Okay, and now what we've got is we've got the keyer, the resize, and this. And in this case, what we need to do is actually just go into the library and load up this clip, A02C025, which looks like, let's see, which one was that? There's this one down here. It begins at 1758, 3616. Load this in. And now when we exit out of this batch effects, of course, we now have a render here with a bright and a key. Now again, that's what I was telling you before. What you'd have to do is you have to go in, of course, and adjust your key to compensate. But again, depending upon what you're doing, that just might work fine for you. So if we'll just go ahead and reset the keyer. Let's go ahead and just try doing this. Again, you can see that you can pretty much get back to where you were in certain instances, but again, probably has a little bit of work that you'd have to do. With this, let's go down here and scroll down to the end. If we take a look at our resize here, go ahead here and do a pre-batch effect and then expand our history. You can see that I'm going to be kind of screwed because I got this desktop paint action going on, all right? So again, depending upon your scene, that's why you'd have to go back and do stuff manually. But again, you can always replace this clip in the end if you need to. So let's go ahead and exit out batch effects, and you just have to recreate that on your desktop. Well, that's a look at the using files and a little bit of history and relinking and so forth. It's really critical, again, that you kind of be aware of how it looks for these frames when you're doing EDLs and so forth. The stuff that you really have to rely on is resolution, as well as frame rate, as well as bit depth of your clip when you're working in order to make this kind of work effectively for you. So let's go ahead and load up our fun clips. And this is a way to clean up edges on keyers. We've got these two scenes here, nighttime scene, and then we've got a background scene, just so we'll use as rough. So let's go ahead and go into batch and take those in. I don't want to delete that. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and come here into the keyer. And if we take this in to the front and the mat, and we'll just do really quick key here. Go ahead and take a look at this. We've got the mat in the background. We'll take a look at this. You can see we've got a little bit of problems. We'll just go ahead and kind of take this down like that. Okay, and if you take a look at this, what we've got is we've got some edge problems here. We've got a little bit of mat or spill here, so let me go ahead and just take that out. Wind a little bit of that out, and let's go ahead and bring this up as we have more fires in the neighborhood. But you can see what's happening is we're getting some edges on some keys here, right? If we take a look at this on our black background, you can see that we've got these nice edges on the keys. And so, hopefully the fire's not here. So what we can do is we can use a little trick that's really quite cool, using actually the spark. So what we'll do is go ahead and take a spark, and it's going to be, we're going to use a sapphire spark for this, and we're using distort mask. This is previously lens, and what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and kind of string this together. We'll take the front here and we'll take it into the front, and we'll take the mat here and bring it in. If we take a look at this, what happens is, not so great on distort mask, but what fine mask does, it will actually take and actually start taking our edges and doing some stuff along the edges here. You can see that I'm kind of winding out from the mat, winding out the edges, and we're actually getting a little bit of duplication here, which is really interesting. So what we can do with this is we can actually use this to our advantage and actually let us kind of clean up the edges on this. And I'm going to go ahead and switch this to the black background here on the keyer. I'll just go ahead and call out a colored frame here so it's a little bit easier to see. So go ahead and take this and set this to PAL. Go ahead and take this into the back. I think that's 12-bit, so we'll do 8-bit. PAL. There we go, got everything. All right. If we take a look at the spark here, here's our normal, what we have normally here. And again, if you bring this out, you can see that we're going to duplicate this edge material here, and we're just growing effectively them out and getting rid of those edges. And of course, you got some spill here and so forth that you can see. But you can see now, if we take this and you can kind of see what's happening along the edges. And so what we do is if we can take this now, and we'll just go ahead and add a quick comp down below. And we'll take the output of this, and we'll go ahead and use black for right now, and feed that to the back. And we'll take this original mat here. You can see actually that we're going to clean up the edges considerably on this. So let's go ahead and set this up to context 1, and look at the output here. Okay, so here's our original output with the edges. If we switch to context 1, you can see actually we've gotten rid of those edges a little bit. Again, and kind of darkened by expanding it, really cleaned up the edges. Now, again, this is kind of a quick little change and a quick look at this. You can see. But again, you kind of get the idea of how this can work to your advantage. Again, you might have to treat it separately depending upon the areas here and transparency. But you can tell right away that if you didn't want the backlight, that's already looking really much nicer here. So we're basically expanding out the fill. The other thing you can do here that's quite interesting is if you want, we'll go ahead and add an edge node. And if we drop the edge node in here as well, we have a little bit even finer control over that. So if we take a look at this, let's go ahead and set this to context 2. And if you take the edge, set this to context 2, you can see that by eroding or shrinking the edges, you can see that you can kind of control what gets fed into that. So here's that edge being fed there. If we shrink this down a little bit, again, you can kind of expand or contract it depending upon what you want. So right there, you can see how we're kind of, by doing a negative shrink, expanding that out in a way. Again, you get this duplication, which is not right, but again, when we switch back to our comp, you again get rid of those edges. So again, here's the context 1. Take a look at our key here, and then context 1. It's like magic. All right, so this doesn't work in all cases, but again, it's a really nice trick to be able to use to really help clean up edges. I mean, just look at the highlight here on this guy, looking quite good. Again, that's using Sapphire Distort. I believe in version 4 of Sapphire, you end up actually calling that Lens, I believe. So anyway, that's it. That's a little fun, a little quick tip to wrap up the class. As always, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this and be a part of FX PhD. We'll see you next week.